I know,
Let me.
I know we,
Okay, record.
yeah, okay. I know we mostly everybody has been spending their time reading about the deaths occurring in the United States, and also more particularly in our own states. Like me in New York, you thinking about what's going on in North Carolina. We are focused on the deaths, rightfully so, because yeah, I mean deaths are serious. People, we are losing people, but I think we also need to just glance over some other things as well, such as the permanent damage that is caused by this virus in survivors. Serious damage. That is where um, the lungs, the tissue of the lungs is damaged, and the damage can be very extensive, as in you may never be the athlete you were. You may never be able to fully recover from it, depending on your age. Um, your lung capacity will be permanently reduced by 10%, 20%, even 50%. And it all depends on your genetics, your age, your body's chemistry, how you can, how much regenerative power is left in your body. And a lot of people are not talking about it. And that's why I think it's even more important for states to understand that even though you may justify in your own mind that, hey, the death rate has gone down, maybe it's now at 1% or 2%, as opposed to 6 or 7 that Italy and Spain have been experiencing. You also need to look at the other things here, that people are permanently damaged for no fault of theirs. And government right now has the capacity just to temporarily stop the spread, reduce the spread by putting in these measures so people are not permanently disabled. It's like, can you imagine a large part of your population, say, out of, right now they say about 80% of the people will have very mild symptoms. Now that's kind of a little misleading, because they are putting mild as a very broad category. As in, you have some symptoms, you may even think it's very serious, and then your body will fight it, and you may not need hospitalization. And then the rest, 20%, is critical, out of which a small percentage ends up on ventilators, and then people die. And some are treated, and they are sent back home. But after those treatments, there is lung damage. Even in the 80%, there could be some lung damage. Can you imagine a percentage of your population, for example, is disabled, like everybody loses part of their leg? 5% of all Americans are going to lose their legs, or a small part of their leg, like just an ankle, just gone, permanently. You wouldn't like that, would you? Yeah, exactly. I know personally you don't really care about your ankle, but you're a different guy. But somebody like me, I want my ankle. I don't want to fall in that 5% ankleless person. It's like that. It's a permanent disability. And I'm surprised nobody is focused on that. And I'm not saying nobody, but governments are not talking about that. Everybody is focused on the death rate.
Well, that death rate, like, it's like a kink or something, right? Like that death rate fetish. It's always in the news. That's how everything is, right? What's the death rate? What's the death toll now? But you're right. Like, how silly? Why? Like, do you want to get this and be damaged? Do you want to be? You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Do you want permanent damage? That's maybe worse.
Right.
Like, hey, I died. I can get the life insurance at least, but I'm not permanently damaged, right? Then what?
Right. And people need to understand this as well, that You may not die of it, but you may be permanently disabled because of it, or a long-term disability. Maybe your body will slowly regenerate, but that may take, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years,
What do you
10
think?
years.
Yeah. What do you think about that? There was a doctor, and I haven't seen the whole episode, but it was on Joe Rogan. They had a doctor on there, and he was talking about like the younger people, that the scarring would or could recover. He's like, if you're older though, then yeah, you're going to be left with permanent lung problems.
So I did not watch that, but generally speaking, what do you think is the difference between a young person and an older person? To the very, very basic level, what do you think is the difference?
One has been living for longer.
Right.
One has more wear on the body than the other.
Yes, correct. And that means you're also implying that the younger person has better regeneration, right? Better regenerative properties. In the very microscopic, at the very microscopic level, and when I say microscopic, as in at the cellular level, in our DNA or cellular level, what makes us young? When our cells divide, the chromosomes, they divide as well, right? They replicate, right? They divide and they form two cells, and the cells have the same chromosomal makeup, correct? And we have the pairs of chromosomes, and then XX, the last pair, which determines the sex. The females have XX and males have XY. That's our genetic makeup. Every cell has the makeup, the chromosomal makeup. What's different in a young person and old person is that the cell regeneration is that part. And if you looked at what do you say, the chromosomes of a person, and where they divide, it's called a telomere. A telomere it's when you draw those chromosomes, it's like, if you draw that chromosome, you see like a little dot in the middle which joins the different arms of the chromosome. When they divide, that breaks. And the older you get, those telomeres get smaller and smaller. I was just thinking today, what is different about young people, really, at the microscopic level? That's what's different. And as we replicate, as these cells replicate, that's where they start making mistakes. That's why an older person looks older, because of the regenerative properties are no longer there, or they are diminished. Now, of course, there's a connection between this virus and a younger person and older person. That's why it's attacking older people more and younger people less. And each time, our cells reproduce, the telomeres get smaller and smaller. Isn't that funny? Because the DNA is still the same for all cells. Because if our cells lost the DNA, we would just become, I don't know, like a bear or a reptile. We don't. We're still a human, but the telomeres get smaller and smaller. So the replication at some point just diminishes, stops. It's not good. The cells just die. That's what happens. That's the difference. At the very basic level, that's the difference between a young person and an older person. And that's how you can measure aging. You can tell the age of a person by looking at that. the biological age, not the chronological age, biological age.
Right. Well, and then also, right, the younger you are, the more time you have to heal an injury, right? So if you have some type of damage from coronavirus to your lungs,
it all depends on the injury, right? If it's a fatal injury, it's a fatal injury.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain classes of injuries where you may think you have more time, but future is not certain. But yes, in a way, yes. If it's not fatal, then yes, you have more time. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, and people are not thinking on those lines either, and they need to think more about it. We're just taking it for granted. And again, going back to my hypothesis that it's like a combination lock. So if this continues for how long, I don't know, and this mutates, what if? And another thing I wanted to touch about, mutations in virus.
Yeah.
Mutation is a mistake that it makes. That every organism, when it mutates, it's a mistake. It's a change in the replication. And if you use Darwin's theory and all these theories where mutations which were beneficial became a tool in the evolution of the species, and those which were bad just eliminated that species. But the mutations that were good accumulated and made a better species. So this virus is successful in its transmission and its lethality because it has finally mutated to this stage. Now, mutation is inherently attached to replication. You cannot just mutate while you are just sitting there. You have to infect, reproduce, and then those minor changes in the replication during the replication process that happens in the DNA of that organism creates the mutation. That means, because they're so intricately linked, that means the more number of people this virus is going to jump to, the more chances it's going to have to mutate. And that's another thing we will achieve by stopping the spread or slowing down the spread. We will not give it those many opportunities to mutate. I am not hearing this anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, right, that's not another thing that's not being explained.
Right.
But that's one reason why the flu is so prevalent,
correct.
Right? Because it mutates so much.
Because exactly, like we spoke a month ago, why we should take coronavirus seriously. We did talk about the flu. The flu has decades of lead over this guy. And this is a heavyweight in town, right? He doesn't need that decade. He's coming right, swinging, and he's taking everybody out. And then you give him chance to reproduce, have more children, and they're all knockout artists. And one of them becomes even better. He becomes a world champion.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. So this slowing the spread is not only going to help us now, we are probably going to rewrite history of this virus by slowing it down, slowing its replication, putting a brake, pumping the brakes on its mutation as well. So by slowing the spread, we're going to slow down the mutation.
What have you heard? Sorry.
About what? Yes, go ahead.
What have you heard specifically about so far mutations of this coronavirus? I've heard a couple different things, so I'm wondering what you've heard about.
I've only heard about the numbers. They're saying coronavirus patients' prolonged mild illness may point to some mutation. So like I said, it may get strong, it may get weak. Okay? It has small mutations and now has about 8 strains. Some people are saying 8 strains. And some people are saying you don't need to worry about the coronavirus mutation because it's not mutating that much, or it's not doing that. But then previous articles on the internet was trying to explain how the genetic mutations turn the coronavirus deadly. But I did not see anything about this point that I'm making, that by giving it the opportunity to mutate, we could end up making it stronger.
Right.
So by slowing the spread, we can slow the mutations as well. Because by itself, it's not going to mutate. It needs to go in somebody, the host, replicate, and during those replications, it will mutate. And the mutation, even if it's not dangerous, what if it mutates to something less lethal,
right,
but it's different? Then it's just catching up with it. We have a vaccine, then we need a new vaccine, then a new vaccine, just like the flu.
Oh, here's the one I read about. Yeah. So let's see. I read about researchers in China claiming that they may have discovered a mutated coronavirus subtype after finding a patient who was infectious for a record period of 49 days. They said apparently, again, it hasn't been peer reviewed, anything like that, so it's just kind of a scientific observation that needs to be vetted still. But some guy who apparently was infectious for a really long time had a very hard time shaking it off. And because so far I've heard of 2 different strains, but then up to like 40 different mutations. But also, I guess on a positive note, I've heard that most of them they're not very different.
Very different, yes. They're not deadly. Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make is, we're going to take away the opportunity of this virus to mutate if we slow down the spread. We don't give it those many hosts. And even if it mutates in a particular host, we're not giving those mutations the opportunity to then replicate, to become the mainstream.
Yeah.
If it doesn't get transmitted from one person to another, if say, as an example, if say one person gets infected and then that virus mutates into something even more deadly, but that person does not end up transmitting it to somebody else, then you killed it right there. That mutation is done. So that's another thing I wanted to just quickly throw out there. So people can think about it on those lines, that we're not only helping ourselves, we're also helping the future.